You have to look at that list of yours. But then when you look at the list, there's that one that I always save for last in mine. Because see, I said you have to be driven by purpose, fueled by passion, defined by the pride. Well, guess what? That 6th grade teacher is the reason why I'm on this stage today. Oh, I love my mom with all my heart, and I love my wife. I love Margaret. I wish she was still here. And Mark and I, we talk frequently. But it's that 6th grade teacher. He puts me in front of you today. I was being drugged down the hall by my ear in 6th grade. You remember the good old days? Some of you are my age, you got a little frosting on your top. You know what that's all about. This is the pre-timeout era. I never got a timeout. I don't know about you. Who never got a timeout? I even said to my mother one time, I said, I never got a timeout. She said, you want a timeout? I said, just one time I wanted a timeout. There's a timeout. I said, no more timeouts. She said, you got lots of timeouts. We didn't call them timeouts. And then the counting. What super psychological genius said to count? I'm not a child psychologist. I might not even be a great parent, but I do know this. If you give a young person to the age, I don't care what age, if they're young, you give them to the count of 5, they're going to take you there. Because they want to see what you're going to do when you hit that number. Don't let me get to 1,422. We were in a grocery store, my mom and I, about 8 years ago, right? You know, single guy. I said, Mom, go grocery shopping with me. We're not in that grocery store 5 minutes. And everything in my life, it's like, you got to be, I can't believe, I just can't have one normal experience, right? Woman starts to count to her kid, Jimmy. She said, Jimmy, don't make me get to 5. I'm an adult standing there going, Jimmy, take her to 5. She got to 4. She said 4.5. And my mother hollered, 5, whack 'em. Math teacher's dragging me by the ear. Homeroom teacher comes out and he says, what's going on? Math teacher says, what do you think's going on? Who's involved? He said, can I take him to the office? My math teacher gladly said, sure, he's all yours. That homeroom social studies teacher named Paul Reed took me to the principal's office. And for the first time, because of the drive that he had, and I want you to think of those 3 words. I had a 6th grade teacher that was driven by a purpose. He taught school because he had a purpose. He wanted to influence young lives. Oh, he was very passionate, very passionate. I don't care what he taught, it came to life. And you know what else? He took pride. And that's why I sat in that office with him, because he had enough pride in what he did. So he finally looked at me and said, I want to know. I said, you want to know what? I want to know why. He'd be the first stranger I would reveal to how much it hurt in the 60s to be the only kid in that 6th grade class that came from a broken home. When there were events and my dad wasn't there, I used to get made fun of, and I didn't like it. A lot of stories went around where my dad was. Kids can be cruel. Oh, I said a lot of things to him, but I also remember telling him that every girl I pushed, every chair I turned over, and every paper wad I shot, it was his fault, because I was angry. That 6th grade teacher stood up and looked at me with tears in his eyes, and I will remember his eyes for the rest of my life when he said, I have no idea what you're going through. But he said, I will tell you this. He said, the first recess, he said, I knew you were a pretty good little athlete, so I made you the captain. And he said, I went home and told my wife that night what you did. Your first pick was the most unathletic male student in the class. Your second pick, you picked a girl that every boy made fun of. He said, I watched you and those kids that day at recess. I went home and told my wife that for the first time as a teacher in that class, I saw 7 students for the first time at recess laugh and actually have fun. He then put his hand on my shoulder and he said, young man, now tears now are on his cheeks when he said, young man, whether you know this or not. He said, I mean this from my heart. You've got a lot of promise. I'd never been told I had promise. In the new book that I'm working on, I'm not even sure when it'll be out, but I have actually got my report cards from 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade which will reveal something to every person that reads the book. I never made an A in first, second, third, fourth, or fifth grade, and only made 4 Bs. The rest were all C's and D's, because I didn't think I had any promise. I would make my first A in 6th grade, the first grading period after that teacher talked to me. I would go on to graduate from high school, go on to play a little baseball, then I graduated with honors from a fairly prestigious university. But as Paul Harvey says, or his son now, here's the rest of the story. 7 years ago in downtown Pittsburgh at the William Penn Hotel, I was standing on a stage because my company, which bears my name, was being honored as one of the fastest privately held companies in growth. I will never forget thinking to myself, wow, boy, have I come a long way. My 2 sons were with me. My mom was with me. Black tie event, one of those things that you're, ugh. Well, I walked out, and first thing I did, get rid of the tie. I said to the boys, I said, go get the car. I said, we got to get out of here. My mom was proudly holding this plaque. She was all emotional. She said, my gosh, she said, you've come a long way. And I said, I know. I said, this is amazing, Mom. I said, but I want to go, And I didn't mean any offense by how I said, I just want to go. I said, I just want to, because I'm not good in that kind of a situation. All of a sudden, I heard a voice in the William Penn lobby say, Steve. And I turned, and I saw an elderly man, and I said, sir, I said, you talking to me? He said, yeah, yes, sir, yes, sir. I walked over, I said, hey, Mom, I said, catch up with the boys. I said, I'll be right back. Walked over, I said, sir, how are you? He said, I'm doing great. He said, sorry I couldn't be in there. He said, of course, the way I'm dressed, they wouldn't let me in. But he said, I did stand by the door. And I said, well, that's great. I wish I'd have known. I said, and I'm trying to be real polite. And then finally I said, I got to go. I said, and I'm trying to get out of there when finally he said, by the way, he said, I always knew you had a lot of promise. I said, Mr. Reed? He said, oh, yeah. He said, I saw the article in the newspaper. I saw your book, Enjoy the Ride. He said, I shook my head. He said, I just wish Phyllis, that was his wife, would have been here to see this. I said, man. I said, how many years has it been? He said, long time, man. He said, I'm so proud of you. He hugged me. I got chills, and I started to cry, and I said, you have any idea the difference you've made all over the world? He looked at me. I said, Mr. Reed, I do what I do today because you told me I had promise. I said, I speak to in front of 250,000 people a year. I said, do you realize I do that because you were driven by purpose, and it was your passion and the pride you took. I said, I do what I do because of you, the influence, the impact you made. You made a huge difference, Mr. Reed. He looked at me, and then he smiled. He said, well, he said, I heard I was in one of your books. I said, yes, you are. He said, what's the royalties on something like that? Then I think the best line he ever had, he said, you know what's so funny? He said, you used to get in trouble for talking. Now people pay you to do it. So I ask you this question. Who made your list?